guy. I think his name's something Morrison. You might know him on YouTube. I'll get into him in a minute if I can find him. It's not really important. What I want to say is with respect to yoga and advanced yoga, I'm talking about that like contortionist slash exorcist type of flexibility. I do believe that's feasible. I believe the body and matter is very elastic, more than we think it is, and it can be trained with, you know, belief, volition, your logic configuration, and your personal axiomatization, such that you could do. I'm not going to say anything because it will scare someone coming into this conversation for the first 30 to 60 seconds, but I'm a firm believer I could probably turn my head like an owl, or move my, rotator cuffs, or move here my wrists, for example, like move it like 360 degrees. I think that is like we take for granted not our lack of understanding of how our biomaterial works, our wetware, our physiology works, but like it's not just the brain that is plastic, and that word's kind of dirty because it means it has slightly nuanced term plasticity, but really like you said earlier, like people are capable of changing, and I agree with that. We're capable of drastically updating. Oh my god, that's all.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I couldn't
That
help
would
myself.
that's what I want to get into the memes as well, but yeah, whatever. I think people get, I think you agree with my premise, which is like yoga, and this is obviously part of your framework, but they don't, my audience might not know that. Um Through
I've been
yoga,
practicing
you can
yoga
do
for a
anything.
very long time, but I generally do not advise that people should attempt the contortionist stuff because the risk of injury is outweighs the benefit. So the benefit, in my view, of the asana, which is the poses, is bandhas. And I think I've mentioned bandhas to you a few times with like you have to lock
Yeah,
the root
I'm good on
chakra
that.
and then it moves upwards. And so contortion, I don't see how that would help with bandhas unless you're talking about maybe a deep back bend. But yeah, it is possible. Like a lot of stuff is possible, and you can see pictures. Like I used to have this huge book of just pictures of people doing wild contortions, and it was a yoga book, but it should have been really a circus book because they were really like they looked like they had had ribs removed or something.
You'll have to send me the link, if you remember it. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
if I
guess
can remember it, I'll send it to you. It's a
here.
huge book. It's like a coffee table book, and it has that New York yogi Dharma Mitra in it. He's famous for doing an freehand headstand, so only his head was touching. Yeah.
Mm,
Anyway, yeah, so that my background is yoga, but I don't talk about it very much in the sense that I actually practice it because it's so unfamiliar to most people, though most people that know me IRL know I taught a yoga class and do yoga stretches, but that's about as much as they understand that I'm interested in it.
so
Slash,
here.
some of my friends know I'm interested in Ayurveda, which is like tangentially connected to yoga in most people's minds, even though they're sister sciences traditionally.
Right. So my argument for why contortionism and exorcism style flexibility may, besides, like you said, the spinal fold, might be useful, is because of like you have to think of it from the frame of, as you're learning to do these things, there's also an abductive association just with your experience. So for example, if you learn, let's just say you learn how to like move your all your toes. Maybe you can already do this. I can't. Like move all your toes at will in the proper order. Like my toes are like phantom fog, right? Like I don't have any consciousness about like moving a specific toe. But if I was learning that through reinforce, so-called, so to speak, reinforcement learning, and and my own neurological deep learning, so to speak. I'm sorry to be funny, but so if I was learning how to move my toes proper, and I was also doing something like annotating my experience, I might make an abductive, I don't know if that's maybe the proper term, but like I may make an association, just like in the same way, like when men puff out their chest, that moving back of the shoulder blades and moving of the chest also has an association with it of masculinity and hostility and defense. Well, why don't you also decorate your entire surface of your body, not physically with items, but with these associations, which you can then parameterize and oscillate and kind of like fine tune and eventually dissolve through annotating and annotating annotation, like we talked about last video. But the idea behind that is like, so say, let me get weird for a second. Say you learn to move your left arm in any direction, like you move it like a robotic arm, like like a crane or something, or like a really nice flexible robot somehow, just because you're constantly updating the molecular map and the tissue map over physical and mental contemplative exercises over your life. What if you then make an association with magicka, or something where like, oh, if I whip out my hand like this, it's going to actually curse someone, or it's going to send a flame. If you do that abductive association, what I'm calling, and I hope you're able to follow a little bit, I'm just saying, like, that's the benefit of using your body to expand the map, literally the morphological map of manifestation. Like neuroscience will kind of go, and I'll stop now, but like neuroscience will kind of go to this length with the somato maps. You may have seen like the homunculi human with like the big lips and the big hands, that is a representation of the brain according to neuroscientists, or representation of your body from the brain's perspective, in this really weird like dualism that they got going on, I guess. But really, my what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, okay, all I'm trying to say is like every atom of you, and then your hyperbolic theater, so to speak, not to get Cartesian, but this idea of like every single qualia or quail can be every single quail can be hijacked for an association and another purpose, which is also quail. So there's like this quail coupling going on. Does any of this make sense? Hopefully, on record, I'll be able to write it in a different way. It makes sense if it didn't. So basically, you're using your body as a contortionism and exorcism style flexibility is good because you can literally expand your mind with by expanding and experimenting and playing with your body.
Sure, like I don't want to belabor the argument. I'll just say please be careful.
But what do you? Well, I'm just curious on your opinion and preference, and I guess inference as well on that claim I'm making. Like not claim, but like basically I'm offering you
Well, I think the
my
contortionism
frame.
offers, like I said, it's might help something, but it's diminishing returns
Right,
with
right. Yeah,
regards to
I do
the
see it as a
body.
short-term thing. Yeah.
So it's not unheard of. People have done this. Like there are famous, yogi contortionists historically. So it's not, I don't really do that very much. And in
Yeah,
terms of
yeah.
psychic projection, it's important to do psychic projection, but I think it has to be a protection. Because if you're putting out bad intentions, then you're going to attract bad intentions. So protection puts out a good intention.
Yeah, and that's going back because this wasn't on record. When I was talking about expansion, contraction, if that was making sense, about like, how I express myself and what I do, because basically I need to take a step back, like a nice hiatus where I'm not interacting too much because of that reason that I'm still kind of in monkey mind. Like I still have a lot of resent and I don't want to have the siddha or any of the yogic stuff associate with more, you know, resent or cognitive dissonance or confirmation by any kind of like lower level conscious kind of cognitive
Yeah,
architectures.
I don't think you have to worry about that too much because to me, cities rather are something that would come out once you have activity in the Ajna chakra. And I think without training, that's not possible
Without training what?
to have activity in the Ajna chakra.
Yeah, yeah, I
Like
mean, to get
even
that
me,
activity, what would you have to
like
do?
granted, I suppress my Ajna chakra a lot because it's just wouldn't do any good to have it on full blast. But what would you have to do to get it to work? Having had it never, having never had, wait, damn you, English. Having never had that power before, you would need to seal off the root. That's the most important part. Because if you can properly seal off the root and you focus on it continuously, the rest will happen spontaneously over time. So getting it to a point where you're not uncomfortably tense, but you're holding at all times in the root chakra, then the energy will start to fill your light body. But that filling process is very slow. So to go straight to your Ajna chakra from there, people do try this and it doesn't end well. It just ends in like confusion, possibly bad side effects, like a nervous breakdown type thing. But if you do it correctly, it'll just rise up slowly. And for it to get past your chest in this society would be surprising
Right,
because
so
there
yeah.
is so much suppression from the chest and the throat in our society. And then
Yeah.
once you can get if you can get past that, getting to the Audra is probably actually not that hard. But I would see that journey to getting to the throat actually being fully open would be very long for most people.
Oh, yeah, and I'm still you're yeah, absolutely. I'm still mapping out. I still get lost when it comes to my Cetic as well as my body maps or, you know, like phase map, you know what I'm saying. But I will say, and I'm okay with diving in because we're getting kind of juicy now. When I was in this kind of more contempt, when I did this earlier in 2015, 2016 with my 3 hour routine with not really yoga per se, but meditation, that actually triggered the siddhas, the very deep hallucinations which are like in it they're not like gestalt interpolations, but these are actually like teeth falling out of my mouth or seeming to stuff like that. I was telling you and Gus about it earlier, you may remember. That was definitely because I did not, obviously because I didn't have control over regions like the throat and stuff when I was having ajna open perhaps. um, but that non-local transport is what I'm calling, basically like classical teleportation or macroscopic
Yeah,
quantum
it sounds like it
teleportation.
opened from the top.
Yeah, it did
And
because
if it
I
opens
had
from the
absolutely no
top,
understanding of anything below my
it's
chin.
unstable. It's unstable when it comes from the top, unless
Right.
you're already at the top. That's why the
Yeah.
whole Bondas thing is central.
That is like
I'm actually
my
surprised, like,
doja.
almost no teachers talk about Bondas. Just goes to show you how little people actually understand about stuff.
I mean, I've been doing body locks now recently pretty intuitive. Like for example, like let me just so the only banda I formally know is Muladhara, right, which is the solar plexus lock. Yeah. So I might be mistaken, like the diaphragmatic lock. Basically, like, I'm not trying to be funny or anything, but now I'm, like, doing neck and chin. I'm doing, facial locks. I'm doing heart, chest and diaphragmatic, as well as kegels or and reverse kegels. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is related to to bandhas, yeah? Or am I mischaracterizing bandhas?
Yeah, that's really that it is what it is.
Yeah. So basically, like, earlier when I was in 2016, I was just doing Muladhara. Now I'm like actually like every day because of this noting and expansion contraction routine. What is derived from you and basically a brainchild between you and Chavis has let me adopt my own super utilitarian philosophy in which I'm gonna eventually write all this out. But like basically what I'm saying is yeah, okay, so I'm locking these like these spinal, my what do you call it, like proximal frame or posterior chain frame. But then my only argument, I think you kind of agreed with me. You just cautioned me to be careful. Is like I'm just arguing. Well, you can also do that with every fiber and atom of your being, as well as your non-local being, like the your surroundings, your thought, like everything can be locked and expanded and contracted and kind of like perfected and sculpted and made beautiful and made optimal. That's all that I mean, and yeah, it's a lifelong journey, yeah. Um, but I think we're on the same wavelength with that bit. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lifelong journey, and once you start working with technology, you'll agree with us. Like, I'm sure people who've never used it are like, they're exaggerating. Can't be that powerful. It's like, no, it's more powerful than you realize because when you're uninitiated, you don't know what's possible.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, this is the best way to go about it. It's just acknowledging that even at the end, even when you have a full enlightenment, there's still a degree of maintenance required.
And I want to also take this time on record to kind of play devil's advocate, not devil's advocate, but like an apologist for the imperial empirical carousel, because like look at it this way. Let's use the elephant, the blindfolded people investigating the elephant thought experiment. Like you could say that yogis and people who take the more Eastern traditional route, well, first of all, you could be cheeky and say, well, they're just, even though they have a blindfold on, they're using their third eye to see the elephant. But you know what I'm saying? Like the yogic people in that community who are advanced, like you, well, let's say they'll see the front, they'll be touching and investigating with the blindfold on the front of the elephant. And then the physicists, chemists, and then biologists are kind of there too. But then the chemists and the physics and I guess the more theoretical people, they're like looking at the asshole and the tail of the elephant. And there has to be this integration between, not in a dualistic sense, but like everyone's perspective through mimetics, which we can segue into that after this bit. If we can integrate it, we can understand the elephant fully, everyone, or at least, whoever the superior caste, if we're in a hierarchy system. And then we can decide, okay, so what are we gonna do? What is the elephant? Is the elephant reality? Yeah, so what do you do with that? Going back to my snarky, like, build centric stuff I was talking about with you and Gus. Like, what are you gonna do once you figure out the true nature of reality and the absolute frame of reality?
And did
And
we actually talk about that?
no, but where do you want to go first? That or meme science and memetics?
Well, we can talk about that for a bit, but I feel like it's almost pointless to talk about because people don't believe it, even though it's true. So I
What
can
about yogic
say it.
integration?
Yeah, like the question of where do you go after you've reached enlightenment?
Yeah, well, so what do you think? Like, what is your
Well, first
philosophy
first of
behind
all,
that?
I'll say that, for an unenlightened person, the enlightened experience is completely unrelatable, so you may not wanna do anything,
Right.
and that's a good thing, because 'cause you're gonna be completely self-contented, but that is not really how it plays out, at least for me. I can't speak for other sages, but for me, like, when people are suffering on Earth, like, it affects me.
Right. And that's
So,
because that's derived from your the configuration of your personality, which if I remember right, and if I remember correctly, personality is a metaphysical object in your framework.
it's physical,
Right, but
but everything's metaphysical. So, I mean, anything
yeah.
physical is also metaphysical, but we tend to refer to things through their physical presence, which is why the explanations get confusing because it's like, well, we're trying to ground it in physicality. Physicality is an appearance, but anyway, so yeah, the personality is best thought of as a physical concept. And
Hmm,
that's because you don't want to get into mixed up concepts about a soul. Not that I'm not saying
yeah.
souls don't exist. Soul's a perfectly good model for certain applications, but yeah, the personality is a physical. I understand it as a physical thing.
But you mentioned earlier, people's and correct me if I'm mischaracterizing, but you were talking about people's capacity to really update or be different over their lifetime. But is the thing of personality, is that a little more non-plastic in your framework? Like
Well, there's a couple of factors. Okay, so relative to other animals, we're evolved to evolve. Okay,
Mhm.
so we have an intrinsic plasticity on that level, but then the personality is the least plastic aspect of that relatively plastic entity. Because and that's a definitional thing because we want things to be the irreducible component. So the personality is the irreducible component of subjective experience.
Okay, can I throw you a curveball that might be fun?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's assume, personality as that could I say like a fundamental non-local unit, or is that pushing it too far?
It's local.
Right. So when that was what I want to get into. I wanted to throw in the buzzword open individualism. Just for the audience and also just to remind me, what does the compatibility look like between personality and personhood, not necessarily selfhood, but personality and open individualism. If I could just offer real quick my frame that I've been playing with in my head, so to speak. So you have personality, which is literally the personal reality is a hyperbolic space, depending on your level of realization. But if you posit open individualism as a fact or truth, then there's this interesting interplay where, for example, our hyperbolic theaters, I hate that term, but I just can't think of anything else right now. Right now, we're having we're sharing. Like there's a sharing between not personalities, I guess is maybe stretching it, but there's definitely a sharing of realities here. Now, granted, I'm really kind of stretching and abusing without asking you the denotation and of personality. I'm assuming I just said personality, and my understanding is like personal reality. And I don't like when people do that with linguistics, and it's kind of corny, but I do kind of agree with that. Like, but maybe I'm
I
asking
can answer.
about yeah. But first, before you do, it's just define for me personality from your framework.
Yeah, so personality is a uh, psychological concept. So
Mhm.
psychological concepts do figure into philosophy, but it's up to the arbiter. The philosopher is the arbiter to invoke psychology. For example, reading historical text. Oh, this was actually motivated by narcissism of a delusional schizophrenic. Therefore, I'm not going to take it as authoritative. So that has to do with that has to do with the personality of the author. So there is some obviously degree of understanding of a psychology, and to a large extent, you know, this is the bottleneck for a lot of philosophers' understanding. They don't see the psychological undercurrents to data. They just take data as basically self-represented. But anyway, that's kind of a different problem. What is a personality? Is the irreducible component of subjectivity. So when you have a thought, that's your personality that thought it. When you feel something, it's your personality that felt it. So it's basically a filter that makes thoughts, emotions, and sensations coherent to
Okay.
subjectivity.
So you're
That's
offering a
personality.
yeah, you're offering a way more rigorous and clear definition, but all I want to say, is that even though I was talking hyperbolic and throwing these, QRI pilled terms like hyperbolicity or whatever, I think my understanding is effortlessly compatible or seamlessly compatible with what you just said of an
Yeah, it didn't sound.
irreducible
It
unit
didn't
of
sound. It didn't
subjectivity.
sound like it was incompatible.
I'm just
So
trying to, yeah,
the
real
goal
quick.
of
I'm
my
just trying to
description.
dice. Yeah.
The thing is that the goal of my descriptions is that I want them to be compatible with as many conventional associations as possible. Not everybody's a panpsychist, obviously. I can't hit everybody, but your own personal definition or whatever reassertion of the definition of something like personality. I'm hoping for most people that they're going to be just fine. Like, what did you say? It was the subjective experience?
I right. So like I just said personal reality. Like you literally your phenomenology. I was kind of expanding it
The problem with
outside
that
of
definition is you could say that it's circular because you're not defining person.
right. So I'm also visualizing it right now is I'm taking that psychological phenomenon of personality and kind of expanding it into more cognitive, which, that is still, psychological, but is now riding this, you know, you know, self-delimited line between physical reality and some type of dualistic Cartesian theater, which we both don't